Well, hi folks. Welcome to another Esoterica live stream. I really like doing these. This is a lot of fun. It's been a really busy past couple of weeks here on the channel. We've really gotten a lot of stuff done. It's amazing that we got some of these Kabbalah videos that have been coming out. I hope folks have been enjoying these Kabbalah lectures. I'm actually doing an entire class on Kabbalah for the congregation I belong to, Congregation Tchia. And they were gracious enough to let me repurpose those and reuse them on the channel. And so it was a lot of fun getting to use those. And I think when you maybe watch some of those Kabbalah lectures, you get more of a sense of how I am when I'm actually teaching, like in a classroom or something, as opposed to the Esoterica content, which is a little bit more scripted, I guess. It's literally scripted. I write a script every week. So hopefully folks have been finding the Kabbalah videos interesting and engaging, and maybe a different take on Kabbalah. And of course, it's still going to be a couple more weeks until we get into the Kabbalah proper. So we'll be getting there pretty soon. In fact, in the actual class that's going on, we just got to the Sefer Yetzirah and the Sefer Bahir, and those episodes will be coming up on the channel pretty soon. But yeah, it's been great. We've been doing some episodes on Gnosticism. Really got into that episode on the three steles of Seth, which I think is just one of those super fascinating texts from the Nag Hammadi library that, I don't know about y'all, but I think that sort of the Apocrypha of John and the Gospel of Truth really steal all the show. And many people, when they read from Nag Hammadi, they basically do the Gospel of Thomas or the Apocrypha of John, or maybe the Gospel of Truth. And there's so much more stuff in there that is worth taking a look at. And I think that a good example of that are the three steles of Seth that really give us an interesting glimpse into the Gnostic, on the side of Gnostic ritual life, which we know so little about. So it's great to be able to work on the more ritual side of that. And I'm really looking forward to doing a lot more episodes on Gnosticism. I think over the lifetime of this channel, I imagine I'll get to almost everything in Nag Hammadi. So so look forward to those. I guess I've, God willing, several years of doing the channel, and so I'll be getting into lots of stuff with the Nag Hammadi library and Gnosticism. What else have we worked on recently? Go check the thing. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff done. So it's been great. It's been a great couple of weeks. Also privately, so in my private life, also it's been a really great couple of weeks. My brother and his family were here for the first time since the pandemic started, and also my mom was able to come up, which was really great. She's somewhat disabled, and so getting her to travel was really great to have her to be able to travel, and so get the family together, hang out, despite all this dreadful stuff with the pandemic. It was great. So it's been a great couple of weeks. If you're curious what I've been up to this morning, not that you care, I've been building bookshelves. I've had to build 3 new bookshelves. Have a ton of new books that I've been picking up for the channel mostly, and so I'm having to move some books around. And the reason why I'm doing that, not just because I need more shelf space for books, is that I'm going to do that shelf tour thing soon. People have been saying that they want a shelf tour. I didn't even know what a shelf tour was until I looked it up. And it turns out people walking around with a camera pointed at their books and what they have on their shelves is interesting to people. That seems weird to me. But if you guys want a shelf tour, I'm happy to do one. So I need to clean up my study a little bit, rearrange some books and things like that. So I'm going to be doing that pretty soon. So yeah, look forward to that at some point soon. I don't know that it will replace weekly Esoterica content. I may need to do it in a couple different shifts, but I'll get to it. So, and you can kind of see behind me, that's just one big, I think directly behind me there is mostly Kabbalah, and yeah, it's Kabbalah, Gnosticism, all kinds of stuff. So we'll be getting to that shelf tour or whatever, library tour, whatever you want to call it. It's weird. Be getting to that here and here in a couple weeks. Next week, if you're curious, on the channel I'll be covering perhaps the most important text of demonology in history. That is to say, it's Michael Psellus's text on the operation of demons. It's probably the most important demonological text in the Middle Ages. It's definitely the case that that Michael Psellus is on the operation of demons influenced more demonologists. In fact, Agrippa's entire discussion of demons and stuff in the 3 books of occult philosophy to lean heavily, really heavily on Michael Psellus's demonology. So I'll be looking at that text, which is surprisingly not that long. It's only 40 pages long or whatever, but it's one of those texts that had a huge impact, but I don't think it gets read much anymore. Although you see it being quoted in people like Johann Weyer, Agrippa, you see it all over the place. So it's a super important text. And I have a show and tell. Is that the right show and tell? I have a show and tell. I'll do it in a little bit, specifically about on the operations of demons. So I have a fun thing to show you. It's not a demon, probably. So let me jump up and see some questions. I saw some questions come in. So let me grab some questions and I'll kind of ramble on. I can stay on today for about an hour and a half. Actually, my partner is going to take the kids to a cookout thing before Shabbat, and so she's going to be out and about with the kiddos. So I'll have a little bit more spare time to hang out with you guys, which is great. I really like doing that. So we got to hang out till about 5:30 my time. So if I can get a lot of questions. So let me check out some of the questions. Oh, I see Legia Resurrected is in the chat. Hey, Adrian. It's great to see you. I have that bottle of Pernod Fils actually right behind the camera. I can grab it. That I think I saw you comment on the thing on Reddit about that bottle. I just got it in today from Spain. So it's the 4th bottle this year I've been able to find of Pernod Fils from the 50s and 60s in Spain, and those are getting rarer and rarer. So it's really great to be able to find them and find them for not too expensive, which is great. Anyway, absinthe aside. Let me jump in and grab some of these questions. How much is mind altering practices are involved in esoteric practices? I would say a good bit, actually. I mean, the use of intoxication may just be basic to not just human beings. It seems to be basic for lots of creatures. There's a really great episode, really videos you can watch of howler monkeys waiting for fruit to ferment and then eating the fermented fruit and having a great old time. That I think intoxication is one of these basic human needs. And what's a good piece of evidence for that, I suppose, is that basically every culture develops some kinds of intoxicants. And there's a wide range of intoxicants that cultures develop. And it's unsurprising that those alterations in consciousness, because I don't like to think about, I don't like this phrase altered states of consciousness, because that assumes that consciousness is sort of, there's a baseline consciousness and you can alter it. I think that rather we can talk about alterations of consciousness and talk about the fact that consciousness is always kind of fluctuating pretty wildly throughout an average day. And then, of course, the use of intoxicating drugs, whether they be something like alcohol or psychedelic or stimulants or things like nicotine that we could see, for instance, and that were used by the Maya. Maya also used hallucinogenic enemas, which is really interesting. So there's all kinds of ways to get these things in your body. And so absolutely it's the case that many religious traditions use either in a symbolic form or in an actual form some kind of intoxicant. And all those intoxicants, including things like caffeine even, are part and parcel of how these things develop. Caffeine is especially a great case because in some ways, the all-night vigils that you see developing in the 17th century in the Islamic world and in the Jewish world, both in Kabbalah and in Sufism, only happen in the context of the importation and popularity of coffee. Coffee drives Kabbalah and 17th century Kabbalah and Sufism in a big way. And so you can think about an alteration of consciousness basically being, hopped up on coffee being a huge part in the development of Kabbalah and Sufism. So absolutely, mind-altering substances are a big part of this. And academia doesn't do a good job of portraying that well, but it's definitely the case that they are definitely a big part of religious practices. I don't know. The other guy asked about Manly P. Hall. I have not read much Manly P. Hall, to be honest with you. I need to go back and do some more reading of Manly P. Hall. He's one of these people in the 20th century that I just don't know a lot about. So, well, if you haven't, no investigation, no right to speak, right? No investigation, no right to speak. So I haven't done a lot of investigation of Manly P. Hall, so I don't want to say too much about it because be talking about something I don't know about, and that's irresponsible. Any scholarly connections between the vision serpent of the Maya and the same serpentine demiurge of the Gnostics? I don't know of any, but I have to be honest that, you know, I'm sure that there are comparative stuff that gets done here. The role of snakes and snake imagery is pretty popular in many religious traditions. In fact, in Judaism, you have the image of the twisted serpent as well. So yeah, there's certainly some there's something symbolically powerful about serpents that you see happening all over the world. And so I think from a comparativist point of view, not that I'm not that interested in doing religious comparativa, just because I have philosophical problems with that methodology. But it's definitely the case that you see these serpent images all over, and I think that one could do some comparative work there. Of course, the most, I give the example of the vision serpent in the lintels from Yashchilan, and they're pretty famous. But of course, the most famous image of the vision serpent that I didn't include is the tomb of Pakal, the tomb of Pakal, the giant tomb, right, with him lying in the center of it, right, and the vision serpents all around him. He's sort of emerging or descending into the underworld. It's not really clear, maybe both actually. And so the image of Pakal that was found, that's probably the most famous version of the serpent image. I want to get back to doing more Maya stuff because I really find that their worldview is super, super fascinating. Super fascinating stuff. If I studied the history of the Jesuits, not so much. I haven't studied, I know a little bit about the Jesuits, but I admire Jesuit institutions, I will say. I've taught at a Jesuit institution in town, and I really like teaching there. And I talked to some of the Jesuit brothers, and I really respected them a lot. They have there's an intellectual rigor that's part of that movement that I really appreciate. So I don't know much about the history of the Jesuits, but at least the ones I've met now I really, really like. Let's see here. Thanks, folks, for all the kind words. Do you feel the desire to practice some of the magic you study in these texts? If so, what draws your interest the most? I don't really. I don't really feel the need to practice a lot of the magic that I read about for a few reasons. One is a religious reason. I just think that the way that I practice my religion kind of forbids me from that kind of practice. Secondly, I just have philosophical questions about the efficacy of any kind of supernatural causation at all. That's another thing. And thirdly, I don't know. The things that are promised by a lot of magical texts that I read are just things I'm not interested in. Do I really want to learn rapidly a bunch of information through magical means about the Ars Notoria? Not really. Like, I like studying. I like the process of learning things and how it's kind of arduous and difficult. So I like that process. I don't want to magically learn something instantaneously. Do I want someone to fall in love with me? Not especially. It seems really morally compromised to force people to love you. That seems bad. It's like mystical codependency. That's gross. I'd like to find some buried treasure. That's, but I just don't think there's much buried treasure around here. Maybe if I were living in Europe, I'd be more interested in trying to do some magic to find buried treasure, but there's not much buried treasure around here. At least I don't think there is. So most of the things that are promised by magic, right? Living a long time. Like, I don't really want to live a long time. I kind of feel like I'm if I can get 70 years out of it, I'm pretty good. Even that seems like a long time. So a lot of the stuff that gets promised in books of magic are just things that I'm not personally that motivated by. And secondly, I guess thirdly, fourthly, whatever one I'm on now, fourthly, I guess the other kind of magic that I would be interested in if I were ever to practice magic, or if I'd ever see someone practicing magic, that is to say I could observe someone practicing it, probably be like purist Enochian magic. I'd really be interested in seeing someone being sort of a fly on the wall, or have a seat at the table with someone engaging in Enochian style magic. I would like to see that being practiced, just for lots of reasons. But I think that would be really cool because it's about Enochian angels and stuff. I don't know. So maybe Enochian magic would be the one that interests me the most in terms of something on the practical side of things. Jorge. Hey, man. The women are the precursors of Kabbalah. So I think that I said that not so much the precursors of Kabbalah, but really the earliest prophetic people we have recorded in the Hebrew Bible are both women. So some of the oldest sections of the Hebrew Bible that we have in the Torah are one, the Song of the Sea by Miriam, Hanaviah, the prophetess, and also the Song of Devorah, also described as a prophet and a judge. She's a prophet and a judge. And those sections of the Hebrew Bible and the Torah, most scholars think are among the earliest sections of the Hebrew Bible. They're really archaic. In fact, the Song of the Sea is so archaic that the definite article hasn't even evolved yet. Right? The Hebrew definite article hasn't evolved. And so, and that's really old, right? Because the really old Proto-Semitic definite article is hal, I think, right? And it becomes ha in the north and al in the south with Arabic. But it hasn't even developed by the time that the Song of the Sea was written down. And so those sections are incredibly archaic. They're, again, maybe even reaching back to the Bronze Age, very old sections of Hebrew literature. And both of them are ascribed to women, and both of them are ascribed to prophetesses, prophetrix, prophetesses. And thirdly, I'll say they're both about war, which is really interesting, right? They're both about military conquest. So they're from women, both described as prophets, right? And also they're about war. And so this may be an example of what is sometimes referred to as warband prophecy. So not so much Kabbalah, but certainly a really archaic strata of the Hebrew Bible, of the Torah, as these poems written by these warband prophet women, which is neat. We got to bring that back. Warband prophet women. I'm about that. I'm about that. So how do I relate to? Oh, I see some folks. I see some folks who sent the super chat. Sorry, let me grab it. Thanks. Texas made. Hey man, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see it. I was too busy rambling about warband prophets. Yeah, I'll definitely do. I'll at some point. I mean, I've kind of done videos on some of the pseudepigrapha this famous Charles Worth volume, which I can see from my vantage point here. The two big volumes, and so yeah, absolutely, I'll be doing some episodes on pseudepigrapha and some of the apocalyptic texts, especially some of the lesser known apocalyptic texts, like Second and Third Enoch. First Enoch gets all the play because everybody loves the Nephilim, and they don't really focus on Second and Third Enoch, which is like Hegelic literature, at least Third Enoch is. And so absolutely going to be doing some stuff on those. I really want to focus in on some of the lesser known texts, because you can find 50 good videos on the Nephilim on YouTube, but you don't find many about Enoch being turned into Metatron, because people don't read that stuff for whatever reason, but it's super interesting. But absolutely, thank you for the donation. Yeah, and also thank you from Australia. Wow, it's far away. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you're finding the content useful, right? It's a great, and that's what I really love to hear, right? That it's a stepping off stone for folks to do more self-study. An Esoterica episode about anything is not going to be the end all be all of covering a topic. It's absolutely the case that you're going to have to go and do a lot more research. And Esoterica episodes are a jumping off point for more research. They certainly don't make me an expert in doing them, and they certainly won't make you an expert in watching them. So I really appreciate the kind words. And yeah, that's if Esoterica can be a springboard for folks deepening their own academic, intellectual, spiritual, philosophical, religious journeys, then I will count the channel a big success, a really big success. So thank you. Oh, I saw River in the chat. Hey, River the Nematon. Hey, man. Hope you're doing okay, brother. It's good to see you down there in the chat. Some Enochian hype. Yeah, about that. Super interested in that Enochian stuff. All right, let me see. Let me scroll back up. Wow, there's a lot of questions. Are supernatural entities real? Maybe. I've not experienced one, but they might be. I kind of hope they're not. They could be very inconvenient if they're around. What type of variety of alcohol have you promised to someone to send me in a cask of Amontillado style thing? I don't know, vintage absinthe, pre-ban absinthe. I bet someone could trap me in a wall with that stuff. Wouldn't mind being walled up with some of that. If you're gonna be walled up, why not be walled up with some vintage absinthe? Will I cover Walter Benjamin on the channel? Yeah, at some point. Yeah, I would like to cover Walter Benjamin at some point. I'm not sure what exactly I would cover, but he's just interesting in general. So, so yeah, I'll definitely cover him at some point as I'm gonna get in. Yeah, I'll definitely get into Walter Benjamin. What a tragic character. And killed himself because thought he was going to get caught, and his manuscripts go missing. It's such a pity. Such a pity. How do I relate to the Hermetic Kabbalah as a Jewish person? I don't really. You know, I don't really. I mean, I relate to it intellectually. That is to say, from a scholarly academic point of view, I'm interested in the Hermetic Kabbalah. I'm interested more so in Christian Kabbalah. Actually, Christian Kabbalah, I think, is in many ways, to me personally, a lot more interesting than Hermetic Kabbalah. Mostly because what's going on in Hermetic Kabbalah is that they're trying to kind of get a bunch of correspondences going so they can do ritual magic. And those correspondence, when you need a bunch of correspondences to work, right, you kind of sometimes have to shove the square peg in the round hole or whatever. And by doing that, it can distort things. And I often find that because they're trying to shove a lot of Kabbalistic ideas into Tantra or chakras or astrology or whatever, when you shove all that stuff together, it distorts a lot of it. It distorts all of it. Now, the upshot of that might be that you have a cool mystical practice on the other side of it. And folks who are part of the Golden Dawn or whatever, they were extraordinarily successful in creating a spiritual practice. So far be it from me to belittle that by any stretch of the imagination. But there can be no denial that there's distortions that go on with this, right? And of course, there's distortions that go on with Christian Kabbalah too. Those distortions I just find to be personally more interesting than the ones that go on in Hermetic Kabbalah. And that's not to say that Kabbalah in general is one thing. Of course, it's not. There are lots of Kabbalahs. Even in Lurianic Kabbalah, there are several major different interpretations of Lurianic Kabbalah, entirely different Lurianic systems that are not the ones developed by Chaim Vital, ones developed by Israel Sarug and things like that. And so even within Kabbalah, there's not one system, right? You have lots of different systems that are competing with one another. And so even then it's not, again, I don't want to make it sound like there's a Kabbalah and people distorted it. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. Oh, wow. Saw some more donations roll in. Yeah, thank you, Texas Made. Peter Deutsch. Oh, yar. Great. Pirate. Is it Talk Like a Pirate Day? No, it's not Talk Like a Pirate Day. Not Talk Like a Pirate Day. But thank you so much for the donations. Let's see. All right. Wow. There are. Oh yeah, the summoning of the giant castle to the emperor thing. Yeah, that would be great. I think that you could get in a lot of trouble doing that stuff though. But I don't know. Let's see any video related to Thoth and the Emerald Tablets. If that's the case, the other guy, it's because you're not looking, because I definitely got episodes on both the Book of Thoth, the actual Book of Thoth, the demonic Book of Thoth, Tuhuti, and also I have an episode on the Emerald Tablet. So you got to go check those out. They are definitely there because I made them. I promise you. I promise you. So Eugene, is it a random Q&A or is it related to the topics? Both. It's both. I try to cover questions, prioritize questions from the previous episodes that I've made in the past couple of weeks, but also just down to chat, hang out, chat and hang out. So, what role does numerology play in my studies? Yeah, I'm going to be doing eventually some episodes on numerology. I'm going to be eventually getting to Cornelius Agrippa's occult theory of mathematics. As a complement to his occult theory of language, which I've already done. So I'll be getting to those at some point soon. So yeah, numerology certainly coming down the pike, at least vis-a-vis Cornelius Agrippa. Let's see, is there any esotericism in Hegel's philosophy? Yes, a boatload. I think in many ways Hegel's mature philosophy, especially as it's expressed in things like the phenomenology of spirit, deeply embedded with a great deal of specifically German esotericism. And so, yeah, Hegel dedicates lectures to Kabbalah, he dedicates lectures to people like Oettinger, Swedenborg, Hegel's very, very infused with this. In fact, Glenn McGee has a whole book called Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition, which I'll be doing an episode on. So absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely an esoteric kind of occult influence that certainly seeps its way into Hegel's thought. Let's see here. Wow, so many questions. Have I read Aspram's Arguing with Angels? Yes, I have read it. It's a great book. He's a great scholar. I really appreciated him. He was actually in the PhD program in Amsterdam when I was there. So we met a couple of times and had a couple of good conversations. I think I'm actually even mentioned in that book. I think I'm actually one of the articles I wrote about Dee and Kelly. I think he wrestles with in the book. And what's my favorite edition of D&D? Of course, it always comes down to D&D on Friday afternoons. We'll talk maybe more about D&D later. My nostalgic heart always goes back to AD&D second edition. It's what I grew up with, right? Thacos and all that. But I really like fifth edition. I did not like fourth edition. Did not like fourth edition, but I think everybody didn't like fourth edition. So I like fifth edition a lot. I think it's really well done. I think it's well done. It's great because they made bards cool, right? Who would want to play a bard in AD&D? It's terrible. Now bards are awesome. All right. Wow. There's a bunch of questions. Let me scroll back down here and see if other folks. Yeah, this majestic thing. That's great. It sounds like smegma and majestic at the same time, which is completely gross and stuff, which is awesome. As you can probably hear, I have a slight speech impediment. I have a slight lisp. I didn't talk until I was a little. I had a speech delay. And I think when I learned to talk, eventually, I developed a bit of a speech impediment. So sometimes you can hear it. If I'm focusing on it, I can kind of get rid of it. But whatever. People talk the way they talk, and people talk the way they talk. Wow, Lee McGowan. Oh my God, man. I haven't seen you in like 10 years. Like in South Jackson, Cups or something. My goodness, man, it's good to see you. You should hit me up on my website, Lee. I'd love to catch up with you, man. I'd love to know what you're doing these days, stuff like that. Wow, you never know who's gonna walk into a live chat friend of yours that you haven't seen in 10 years. My goodness, that's so cool. That is so cool. Yeah, I'd love for you to reach out on my website, man, and get in touch with me. That'd be great. Let's see other questions. Oh, wow. So many great questions. Yeah, the folks talking about Dr. Stephen Skinner and Joseph Peterson about the Enochian stuff. Yeah, those are both great scholars. I really appreciate their work. In fact, I just put up my shelf of Skinner books. I have all those texts, which are really, really good. It's really, really great stuff in there. From Brazil, wow. All right. In your study of the Torah, do you feel like it's referencing two different gods, El and Yahweh? Yeah, there's no doubt about the fact. I mean, scholars are basically in agreement that El and Yahweh were eventually fused into one god and were originally distinct gods. El is a distinct god in the Canaanite tradition that existed well before the Israelites came into being as we know them. El was being worshipped by we have Ugaritic texts from the Bronze Age referencing El. In fact, there's a great story of El getting so drunk at a drinking party that he like throws up and falls in it. He like vomits and like falls in his own vomit. It's great. It's one of my favorite stories from Ugaritic literature, with like El getting so just drunk that he like pukes and falls in it. So that's a great story about El, which didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible, unsurprisingly. But of course, Yahweh is another completely other god, Yahweh's being probably coming out of what we might call Midian. I kind of believe some version of the Kenite hypothesis, as you can tell. And that god's probably coming out of North Arabia, maybe the Sinai, and that god is being imported. And eventually, by the composition of the Hebrew Bible, those two gods are fused into one god. But they certainly started off as distinct gods. I'm going to do a whole episode at some point soon on the origin of Yahweh. Like, where do we think this being came from? What was this being originally like? This god who's become so central to Western civilization has a very mysterious origin. And Mark K. Smith has written some really great stuff about the origin of Yahweh. So I'll be making an entire episode on where we think this deity, this being came from. So Interesting stuff. Any recommendations for those of us outside academia to find teachers on Kabbalah and other esoteric topics? I mean, Douglas Packard, it's a hard thing, man. That's kind of why I started the channel, is because I felt like there wasn't a great resource for people to find information on this stuff. And I felt like I could basically fill a gap, right? There are all kinds of great esoteric teachers of occultism, teachers of esotericism, people like Aaron Leach, who is just a phenomenal both scholar and practitioner and teaches it from that angle, which is fantastic. But there weren't, to my mind, many people who are doing this more academic approach to the material, which, again, there's lots of approaches, and it's not for me to say which is best. I have mine. And so that's part of the reason why I started the channel, was basically to provide that public service, really. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful to have a Patreon community and other support that allows me to do this work. But the idea basically was to do that, because you can't go to universities and take these classes. I can't even get a job in a university teaching this stuff. And, when I tell people that I have a YouTube channel with, 70,000 subscribers or whatever on these topics, and I tell other academics, they're like, my God, people are interested in this stuff? And I'm like, what are you, crazy? Of course people are interested in this stuff. People are interested in magic and alchemy and all this stuff. It's Kabbalah. It's incredibly interesting. It's just interesting when it's on and people are interested in it. They're just not interested in going into a bunch of debt to take university classes about it. And those university classes don't even exist. So until that changes, right? And I don't know how it will change. And I think I mentioned this on the podcast on the Gnosticism podcast, is that it's just a case in the United States, at least, that religious studies programs in general are just being cut. So it's not even that you can get access to academic knowledge about esotericism. It's that you can't even get access to basic academic knowledge of religious studies because those programs are being cut, which is just completely stupid. So I think the university system, at least in the United States, and I think this is maybe less true in Europe, but in the United States, it's just got this completely backwards. We need more religious education. We need much more religious education in our culture. And of course, I think people would be interested in the esoteric side of that material as well. But go tell my university that, and they're like, whatever. No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So I don't know. It makes me kind of sad. But could you believe that giant bloated bureaucracies like universities have their priorities mismanaged? Could you believe that? That's unbelievable. Oh, that's unbelievable. All right. What's the relation of Gnosticism and Sumerians? I don't think there's any relationship between the Gnostics and the Sumerians. And I don't think of Atlantis as being important to anything. No, Atlantis wasn't real. This was one of the myths that Plato made up. Plato typically made up myths. He made up myths like the myth of Ur. No one ever asked whether Ur was a real person. This is a myth at the end of the Republic. And at the end of the Critias, Plato introduces this myth of Atlantis, and it's just a myth. It's there to tell a story about power. Mystical perception of light. This is an interesting question in various mystery cults. I don't know about the various mystery cults, but I will say that I really do want to do an episode on Robert Gosa Testa, who is a medieval philosopher and scientist who had this really cool theory of light. And there's just all kinds of interesting esoteric takes on light and how light functions in esotericism, both outer light, right, like this light, that light, but also like inner light, right, the light of reason, right, and Descartes will talk about the natural light of reason, that this light imagery that permeates both esoteric and exoteric philosophy. And it would be really a cool study to do a long-form study of how this began to happen. And you can see it all the way back in Plato, right, when, if you'll remember from the Republic, when Plato wants to show what the forms are, or describe what the forms are there toward the book 8 or whatever in the Republic, one of the examples he uses is the allegory of the sun, right? Just as the sun creates the conditions for the possibility of seeing, so too do the forms create the possibility of knowing. And so even Plato, way back in the Republic, is using light metaphors as a way of describing this esoteric dimension of reality, which is to say the realm of the forms. So the light stuff is super interesting. In fact, there's an entire philosophy, at least in the Islamic world, Illuminism, developed by Suhrawardi, that is a huge esoteric philosophy, a mysticism of light. And that is a hugely interesting thing. Suhrawardi and his book on Illuminism. Really cool to work with Philip over at Let's Talk Religion on a joint episode. on Suarvarti. I've always found his stuff really, really interesting. All right, let me scroll down, see how this is going. Could you repeat the name of that Esoterica teacher you mentioned? Let's see. I'm not sure which one you're. I'm pretty sure Atlantis was not real. You can't sink an island, really. I mean, it's just so like Plato didn't understand what islands are. Islands are part of land stretching up from the earth. You can't really sink one. I mean, they can be eroded and eventually go underwater. You can blow one up like Thera, but I don't think that Atlantis was real. I don't think. Let's see here. Speaking of light, what are your thoughts on the Paracelsian idea of the ether? It's a good question. I need to go back and read some more Paracelsus. I just ordered some books of his, and I have some over the channel on the thing. I'll be doing some episodes on Paracelsus. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I would say about the ether. What languages to start studying esotericism? I would say Latin. Latin. You need to get Latin. Anyone who wants to seriously do some esoterica stuff is going to have to learn Latin. It's just it's indispensable. So much of the material is in Latin, and just learning to read Latin is going to be indispensable. Ditto, if you're going to be doing Kabbalah, you're going to have to pick up Hebrew. It's inevitable. You have to pick up Hebrew. You just cannot get through Kabbalah without doing some Hebrew, and eventually Aramaic. You got to pick up Aramaic for the Talmud, and then of course for the Zohar. So. All right. Let's see. Other questions. Franz Bardon. I don't know much about Franz Bardon. I have to be honest. He's like mainly Hall. It's one of these 20th century, people, right? That I just don't know a lot about. I know that they're really famous in certain circles, but yeah, I tend to my focus, as you can probably tell from the channel, typically my knowledge of esoterica kind of goes like this through time, and then as we get to the 19th century, it begins to drop off pretty precipitously. And so I don't know a ton about stuff from the 19th and 20th centuries, but always time to fill in the gaps. When the university being dominated by wokeism, I don't think the university is dominated by wokeism. I think that's conspiracy theory stuff. Universities are dominated by bureaucrats. That is what dominates universities. It's bureaucrats. So if any ideology dominates universities, so far as I can tell, it's Kafkaesque bureaucracy. That is what dominates universities. As a person who works in academia, right? I teach. So is Moses a fiction? I do not think that Moses was a historical character, a historical person. No. And if he was, he certainly wasn't the historical person that we have recounted in the Bible. I do think that it was possible that some amount of people did migrate out of the Sinai or out of Egypt. But again, people don't really realize this, right? Like the Exodus story. If you take the Exodus story on its face, right? Let's just say that it happened, right? I don't think that it did, but let's say that it did. Let's say it happened in 1200 BCE, because that's about when it would have happened during the administration of Ramses II. If it did happen, right? So if it happened under the administration of Ramses II, right? And let's just say that it let's take it down from whatever 3 million people, and let's just say it was 1,000 people that they left. If you leave Egypt in 1200 BCE or whatever, and then you go into the Sinai, you've not left Egypt. That's still part of the Egyptian Empire. If you get into Canaan, right? Like the Shvela, that entire region, the Judean Highlands, that's also part of the Egyptian Empire. So Michigan, no, like the Egyptian Empire was vast, and so Ramses II, right, when he was around, right, they literally concluded one of the first peace treaties in history with the Hittites up there, right, the Battle of Kadesh, and so that entire area, right, from Kadesh south is all Egyptian territory, right, and so you don't leave Egypt. There are garrisons, Egyptian garrisons, all over that region. And so it's clear that the writer of the Exodus story, when they were writing that down, they didn't know Egyptian history. And they didn't know Egyptian history, and therefore, because they didn't know it, they didn't realize that if you would have left Egypt, or left whatever mainly the Delta, the Nile Delta, go into Sinai, you're still in Egyptian territory. There are Egyptian garrisons out there. Even if you were to go all the way out and around, right, to the Jordan and back around into the Shvela, to the north up there, Jericho, that's all Egyptian territory. So the story just doesn't make any sense from a historical point of view. But no one's going to let history, or facts for that matter, get in the way of their religious beliefs or whatever they want to believe. But that is just I think that's just the way that it goes. In fact, we even have the Stellium Merneptah is a great example of where we know they're Israelites. We know they were there in the early 13th century. Why? Because Merneptah, the son of Ramses II, brags about killing them all. Now, he didn't kill them all. He bragged about it. But we know they're there. And in fact, we know that they're there and they're not a nation state. Because when he mentions them, when the Stele mentions them, the Egyptian determinative, right, the actual Egyptian word for Israel, uses a determinative that indicates that they were a people group, not a nation state, and not a sort of a city state. So when he mentions Gezer, right, that's different. It gets a different determinative than Israel does. So important enough to mention, but really just in a list of people that he's destroyed, right? Just right there at the end of the Stellium Merneptah. So again, this is just good. It's where history and mythology just don't line up. They just don't line up. What is my preference in the occult? I don't have one because I don't really practice. I don't practice esotericism stuff, so I don't have one. I think you would have to sort that out for yourself. How you would find out what works for you and what doesn't. I don't know how people do that. You shop around, do a little Nokian magic, do a little, I don't know, Wicca, become Thelite for a while. I don't know. Sort it out. Wow. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Social Justice Lending Live. Yeah. Thank you so much for the donation there, friend. Yeah. Thank you also for the kind words about the Maya. That's also a thing that I really wanted to do when I made the episode. And I should mention this, just to mention this while there's a good bit of people here. I think that the discourse around the destruction of the Maya civilization, the Maya world, as if the Maya vanish, is really, really harmful to actually existing Maya people. And further, just the heroism of their survival after so much of colonial attempts to destroy them. I mean, we have 5 books from their civilization that have survived, basically. 5 books. I mean, that just shows you, when you think about people like Delanda, right? When Delanda just goes into the colonial areas and the mine just begins to burn everything and he can't read any of this stuff. It's awful, right? It's awful that he just destroys their cultural literacy completely, right? Their text is awful. Unimaginable act of genocide. And that we have 5 books that survive, right? And those books, by the way, should be renamed. I mean, I don't like the fact that they're called the Madrid Codex and the Berlin Codex. They shouldn't be named European names. They should be named after the actual contents of the books written by the Maya people. Just think it's stupid they get the Berlin Codex. So the destruction is so massive. So what I do want to say is, because I don't like make a big deal about this stuff, because I didn't want to put it in the episode or whatever, but because the episode's monetized and all that, what I'm going to do actually is that after about a month of it being monetized, I'm going to match whatever the video makes from YouTube, and I'm going to donate that total to a really cool organization that is helping Maya people, indigenous Maya people, to learn to write in their indigenous Maya script. It's a really cool organization. I can put a link down here if folks want to see it. I'm going to put a link here. But it's a really cool organization that is helping Maya folks to write again the Maya hieroglyphic system again, which I just find that to be a miracle. It's such a cool thing that's happening, and the preservation of their script and the revitalization of their script, because the language is still spoken, right? Quiche is still spoken by 1 million people in Guatemala, and so the fact that the folks can regain access to their ancestral hieroglyphic system is something that I'm really excited about. And I think that when you're really excited about something, you should put your money where your mouth is. And rather than keep that money for myself, not that it's going to be a ton of money or whatever, but I want to donate the entire monetization. I'm going to match it, whatever the monetization is. I'll match it and donate that over to the Maya for Mayans. organization. I just think it's a cool project, and I also believe in tzedakah, right? Tzedakah, the Jewish practice of giving charity, right? I don't like the idea of charity, but literally the word tzedakah means righteousness, right? And so I'm really, really, if I'm going to be righteous, I'd like to be righteous in the way that supports indigenous people. Getting their script again. So I think that would be really cool. I think that'd be really cool. Anyway, I don't want to make a big deal about it because I think that bragging about doing tzedakah is crappy. But just want folks to know that as you watch the episode on the Maya, you drive up the monetization, right? You drive up the amount of money it makes, and it'll all go to those Mayan folk. All right, let me grab some other questions. See a few words about Giordano Bruno and his esotericism. I'm going to be making a bunch of episodes about him. I actually wanted to do an episode just a month ago on his book De Magia, which has a couple really good translations out now. And I want to do an episode on his theory of magic because I want to compare and contrast Bruno's theory of magic with Ficino's theory of magic and show how Bruno in many ways absorbs a lot of Ficino's ideas about how magic works, and then he really radicalizes them. And so what I want to do is take De Magia and compare it a bit to Ficino's stuff, and then sort of spell out his theory of magic. Because his theory of magic, Bruno's theory of magic, is very distinct from, for instance, Agrippa's. Agrippa's theory of magic is very similar in many ways to Ficino's. In fact, I dare say they're not identical, but they're really, really close. Agrippa leans really heavily on Ficino. But Bruno is a lot more radical, as you probably know. And so what I would like to do is show his theory of magic and how it differs from Ficino, and also how it differs from Agrippa, because I think Bruno's theory is a bit different. So look for that episode. It's coming. I need to reread De Magia because I read it once and I made a lot of notes, and I reread it again. But look for an episode on Bruno's De Magia at some point in the future. What do I think about the pharaoh who tried to spread monotheism? He didn't try to spread it. He spread it. He forced it on everybody. Akhenaten, in the Amarna period, right? He's an interesting guy. I mean, the hymn to the Aten is really interesting, and also just what kind of monotheism was it exactly is also interesting, because it wasn't monotheism in the way that we conceive monotheism now. It's kind of almost kind of bitheism, because he thought of himself as sort of related to the Aten in some kind of way. Bad for architecture, by the way. Bad for the architecture. As you may know, when he made the Aten temples there in Amarna, he made them unlike other Egyptian temples, which are dark on the inside, right? Egyptian temples were famously dark in the inside. In fact, they are sometimes referred to as the House of Darkness in texts like the Book of Thoth, where, well, if you're worshiping the Aten, you don't want to make them dark. And so what you do is you basically make them sort of open air, we're almost like a I don't know the right word for it is, but it's open air, right? The temple is surrounded, and there are precincts going in to the Holy of Holies or whatever, right? But it's exposed to the sun. And as you might imagine, when foreign diplomats had come to Egypt and had to stand in the sun to get to meet with Akhenaten, Egypt's a hot place, and they really did not like it. There's stories of them sweltering in the heat in the sun because of the way he built these temples. So that's a funny story about how a religious idea can lead to bad architecture. Or at least architecture that is inconvenient because of all the sunlight. But at any rate, that's what I think about Akhenaten. Jamie Esparza, Olin. I'm not sure what that means, but thank you very much. Thank you very much for your donation. Thank you very much for the donation. It'd be really great to talk to Dr. Skinner. It'd be fun to sit down and have a conversation with him. I think that it'd be interesting to see where we meet and where we go apart, just in a lot of ways. He's a super smart person. I have to say I'm really, really deeply appreciative of the years of scholarship that he's done. And so it'd be fun to chat with him and hang out. It's someone I admire a lot, so it'd be great to hang out with him. Also, I should say this. I don't know who it was, but someone actually got in touch, a common fan of Esoterica, and Jackson Crawford got in touch with Jackson Crawford, Dr. Crawford, who works on his channel on Norse myth and language. And What's also really great is I got to chat with Dr. Crawford this week. We had a really great conversation. He's a really, really nice guy, really kind person. I really like him a lot. And we're gonna do some kind of collaborations here in the future, which is gonna be a lot of fun to hang out with Dr. Crawford. And I think we may do some stuff a little bit on magic and Norse mythology, maybe touch on some of the Icelandic, medieval Icelandic and early modern Icelandic books of magic, and also Norse magic or Seether. So yeah, it'd be fun to hang out with him. It'd be fun to hang out with him. It was great that you were able to make it, Adrian. It's good to see you. Let's catch up at some point soon. Let's catch up. Awesome. Let's see. Other folks. Who was the last great polymathic? That was an occultist, but never really revealed. I was a professor. I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe he's probably not an esotericist. But Kurt Gödel, I think, is one of these characters that I think is really, really fascinating. Gödel was, of course, a mathematician or logician, and he even formulated a version of the ontological proof for the existence of God using modern symbolic logic, predicate calculus. I'm not sure he was an esotericist of any kind, but it's interesting that we don't think of mathematicians and logicians as being theists. Right? Often we think of them, at least in the 20th century, as being pretty antithetical to that stuff. But he certainly was, at least of a certain stripe. When I teach logic, I really love, and when we get to modal logic, usually in the second semester, I really like going through his modal ontological proof for the existence of God, which kind of works, right? Kind of works. It leads to modal collapse, which is bad, real bad. But aside from modal collapse, it may prove the existence of at least one necessary being, which is neat. It may, right? It's valid. I'm not sure if it's sound. Not sure if it's sound. All right, let's see. What's my take on the Shakespearean stuff? I mean, I'll say this, folks, about the Shakespeare. I'm not an expert in Shakespeare. I like the dude. In fact, Karl Marx actually said that you can learn everything you need to learn about human nature from reading Shakespeare, which is an interesting. I always found that fascinating. That Karl Marx, of all people, said that basically you can learn everything you need to know about human nature from Shakespeare, which is interesting observation. Everybody that I know, that I have friends of mine that work on Shakespeare, academic friends who work on Shakespeare, they're all Stratfordians. They all basically argue that Shakespeare was a person and he wrote the plays. So that seems to be where I would land if I had to land anywhere. But I'm not. Again, it's one of those things where I'm not a Shakespeare expert, so I shouldn't have. Well, I trust my academic friends about Shakespeare being Shakespeare, but aside from that, yeah. I think also just it's a case that it's apophenia, right? That in a large enough volume of literature, if you go looking for things, you will find it, right? Like the Bible codes, right? If you go looking, if you're in a large enough matrix, you'll find anything you want to in there. And so, in the same way that I think that Bible code stuff is apophenia, ditto, I think that the Shakespeare stuff is apophenia. What do I think about Picatrix? Picatrix is an amazing text. Usually, sometimes Dan Trell, the modern hermeticist, will be on here. Of course, he's one of the principal translators of the Latin Picatrix. Lena Saif is doing a translation from the Arabic. I'm looking forward to that a lot. It's an amazing little text. I really want to do an episode on it. Bring Dan, modern hermeticist, on the channel to talk about it. And yeah, it's a cool text. There's a lot of weird stuff in there. Cool stuff that mixes up with the Nabatean agriculture, which is also a super weird and interesting text that preserves some Arabic paganism, which is really fascinating. Sort of Arabic hermeticism that existed in probably Iraq. So yeah, we're gonna get to that stuff at some point soon, especially the Nabatean agriculture. That stuff's super interesting. All right. Let's see some other questions. Wow. Yeah, that'd be cool to share a bottle, some 100-year-old absinthe with Damien Eccles and Stephen Skinner. That'd be fun, to say the very least. it'd be great to do a collaborative podcast with those guys, to hang out, chat with them, things like that. That would be a lot of fun. Absolutely would, love to chat with Damien Eccles, and both Damien Eccles and Stephen Skinner are both fascinating people on their own right for different reasons. So it'd be absolutely interesting and wonderful to chat with them. That would be great. Thoughts on George Bataille's Secret Society of Cephalae? As much as it existed, they, barely kind of existed. I don't have a lot of thoughts about it. I'm going to do an episode actually on Bataille's a little short essay, Base Materialism and Gnosticism. And he has a really great argument about how the Gnostics in some ways drove home a kind of radical materialism by hating it so much. I think he overplays his hand, and I don't think he really understood Gnosticism that well, because no one really did at that time. But I'm going to eventually do an episode on his article, Base Materialism and Gnosticism. I like Bataille. I have a weird relationship with him. He's led me into dark water in the past, but I really find Bataille to be an endlessly fascinating guy. Let's see here. What do I think about Tibetan esotericism? I don't know anything about Tibetan esotericism and mysticism. Nothing. If you're interested in that stuff, you should go check out Angela's Symposium. And Dr. Angela Puka, a friend of mine and colleague, she is much more knowledgeable, right? Very knowledgeable on more Eastern forms of mysticism. And, I think she's doing an episode this weekend on Tantra. So she knows a lot more, right? I don't know anything about that stuff, really. Just a little bit here and there. But she's really an expert in that field, much more so than me. So if you're interested in Tantra and more Eastern stuff, Tibetan stuff, then I would go and tell Angela Puka that you wanted to work on that stuff, do an episode on it. Support her on Patreon. She's a wonderful scholar. Make sure to subscribe to her channel. She does great work. I really, really appreciate Angela. Oh, wow. Hey, man. Picatrix, thank you so much for the donation. Yeah, the 3 books, they're a beast. They're a beast. It definitely takes some time to get through them. What I will say that about one tip I have about reading Agrippa is that Agrippa is a systematic philosopher. Now, people typically don't read the 3 books systematically. I don't know why they do that. I don't know why they kind of jump around from book to book to book, and then it's confusing. I'm like, yeah, it is confusing if you do that. If you take the text and read it cover to cover, which is the way it's supposed to be read, it's incredibly systematic. Agrippa was a very systematic thinker. And so I tell people, if you're going to read the 3 books, you start at the beginning and you work your way all the way through. And if you get to a point where you don't know how he got to where he's getting, right, go back to the place where you follow the train of the argument and start there. So you have to really follow the thrust of how his argument works, because he's going somewhere and he's building a systematic case for how his occult philosophy works. So I find that people, when they say it's confusing, when I ask them if they've read the whole thing, they're like, well, I read parts of it. Well, that's why it's confusing, right? It's like trying to pick up the Critique of Pure Reason and reading random parts of it. The Critique of Pure Reason is complicated for other reasons, but if you try to read random parts of the Critique of Pure Reason, it's going to come across as completely incoherent. Well, or ditto with the Phenomenology of Spirit. It's because they're incredibly systematic books, and it's only through taking them in their systematicity, right, that we can understand them. There's a pernicious and wrong idea that somehow mystics and occultists aren't systematic, but often they're incredibly systematic. When you read Proclus's Elements of Theology, that's an incredibly systematic book. And so you have to read it cover to cover. There's no jumping around. There's no reading the highlights. That's what you have to do. So what I'm really telling you is it's going to take a while, and you got to do it cover to cover. You got to do it cover to cover. But I have no doubt that you can do it. It's a great book. The 3 Books of Occult Philosophy is one of these books that's more celebrated than known, but it is an absolutely fantastic text. Absolutely fantastic text. Let's see here. Let's see, other questions. What's a video you'd like to make? What topic would you like to do soon? Me? Let's see, what topics would I'll tell you folks, I kind of do the topics I want to do the week I do them. you guys may not know this, but I don't have some kind of like plan for how these episodes are going to come out. I try to rotate between the topics. So like Kabbalah, alchemy, occultism, other stuff. I try to keep a bit of a rotation going. So I'm not covering, the occult for three episodes in a row and, leaving alchemy out in the wind or whatever. Although I will say that the alchemy episodes never do that well. People talk a big game about being interested in alchemy, but when you actually talk about historical alchemy, people are not interested. Or they're less interested for some reason. I don't know why. I find alchemy to be completely fascinating, but when I do episodes about it, they're often some of the least performing episodes, although everyone loves to talk a big game about alchemy. It's one of those things I think they like the idea of, but the actual history of it, they're not that interested in for whatever reason. But like I said, you guys may not know it, but basically the way that I figure out episodes for the week is that I look at my bookshelf and whatever calls out to me, so to speak, I just do that, right? So I was thinking about what I could do for this next week's episode, and I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know. Let's do something on demons. And I was like, oh, yeah, I could do Michael Psellus, right? And I was like, there, I have the Michael Psellus book, and reading the Michael Psellus text now, looking at the Greek text. There's a really great French translation that was made in the 80s. So I just kind of picked this stuff out of a hat. And so basically why I like to do what I do is I do what I like to do. That's to say whatever grabbed me that week, whatever interests me, I run with it. So, well, speaking of Michael Psellus, I told you I had some show and tell. I'm going to be doing an episode actually, but this is a cool little book that I have. That's in my collection. I don't have a lot of cool antique things, but I have some. If I can get them for a good price. But this is a really cool little hermetic reader from 1578. Yep. So this is a cool little hermetic reader from 1578. I don't want to open it too wide, but you can see, right, if I can get the focus right. Right, there's all kinds of it's like a little hermetic book that has all kinds of cool hermetic tracts in it. And what it has in it, it has Iamblichus's on the Egyptian mysteries, very important text. It has some text by Proclus, including some stuff on the Daemones, and also it has his very, very important fragment on sacrifice and magic, probably one of the most important fragments in the history of occultism. It's terribly important. Agrippa leans heavily on it. I'll be doing an episode on it. We have Porphyry's book on demons and stuff. We have Michael Psellus's book on his book on demons, and of course, it also has Hermes Trismegistus. It has the Pymander, and it has the Corpus Hermeticum, at least the Ficino Corpus Hermeticum, and they're all reprinted here in one book here from 1577. This is a super cool little book, and the reason why it's so cool, one, it's so cool because it's hundreds of years old. But it's so cool because this is the kind of book that you would have picked up, a little octavo volume like this, from a bookseller in the 16th century, right? John Dee could have bought a book like this, probably had a copy. And this would be basically everything you would need to know about being a Hermeticist. This is sort of Hermeticism in one book in the 16th century. And it's a cool little book that captures so much of these kinds of Hermetic things. I'll just flip open here to... and if you're curious, right, I keep these in little archival boxes. But let me flip over here to the, you can see, here we go. I'm sure folks may be interested in seeing it, right? But that is the very beginning of the Corpus Hermeticum, right? And you can see the entire Corpus Hermeticum, or at least the sections from Ficino's translation, along with the commentary of Ficino. So that's the Corpus Hermeticum there. Anyway, I'm going to be doing a whole episode about this little book because I think it's a really great example of what you would have bought in the 16th century if you wanted to be a Hermetist. Also, by the way, you can get these little volumes like this. Sometimes you can get them on eBay. Sometimes you can get them at rare bookstores. These are not as expensive as you might think. You can get them for a couple $100 if you're looking carefully and you kind of know what you're looking for. But people always like the idea of having cool ancient books, but they're actually a lot more available than you might believe. There are a lot more of them out there than you might think. So you can get them. You can actually get them. You can actually pick them up. So, but yeah, it's an interesting little, a really interesting little book here. This Iamblichus book. I bet you can find a copy of this on archive.org. It's a pretty famous little book. I bet on archive.org, this is a PDF out there floating around somewhere. of this text. It's of course all in Latin, but hey, you know, it's just Latin. You have to learn Latin. Anyway, I'll be doing an episode on that, and that actually has a copy of Michael Psellus's book. Yeah, some of those things were on the outside at least, right? This is pigskin binding, and because it's a pigskin binding, right? This is the kind of thing where the oil from your hand is not going to be especially damaging to this when it's not being used. Actually, I keep it. In fact, I have it here, right? I keep them in archival quality boxes, and they're wrapped in archival laminate sleeves. So, favorite book for learning Latin on your own: Wheellock. Just get the Wheellock book. You can get those. You can get the Wheellock book used for $10. Work your way all the way through it, cover to cover, and you'll be great to go in Latin. One of my favorite parts of I interviewed Brian Johnson, the guy who translated the Necromancy and the Medici Library. One of my favorite things that I learned about him is that he taught himself Latin, right? And I looked at his translation. It's a great translation. I'm not a Latinist, but it's a really, really great translation. He taught himself Latin out of Wheellock, right? You can do it. He produced a fabulous translation of that necromancy text, and you can do it too. So 30 minutes a day, right? Take the Wheellock, work through it. By the end of it, you'll read Latin. Legia, Adrian, favorite absinthe or absinthes lately? So modern absinthe wise, my really favorite absinthe that I've been drinking recently are the absinthes that were produced by Cheryl of blessed memory, who produced those out there at Walls and Waters, right? This is Meadow of Love, and Delaware Phoenix was the name of her distillery. Sadly, she passed away recently, so may her memory be for a blessing. But she makes some of the best absinthe, or did make some of the best absinthe in the United States, hands down. So I would say that is a really great absinthe. Defiant Distilleries also makes a really, really good absinthe. I think probably one of the best in the country right now. But as far as vintage stuff goes, I've just been really on this sort of vintage Spanish kick. Let me grab this real fast. Sorry, folks. But yeah, this is the bottle I just got in today from Spain. I found this on a Spanish auction site. It was discovered in an old bar that had closed down, and they were going through it. The guy had died apparently, and they had found it in the basement. And what's great about vintage absinthe is a lot of Europeans are still scared that it'll make you crazy. Maybe it does. It doesn't. But they're perfectly happy to sell these bottles. And I got this for a steal, the price of like a jade. So you can get sometimes these old absinthes, and it still has a cellar dust on it. So crack that thing open at some point, or maybe it'll go live in the basement. So we'll see. We'll see. That's the time. Okay, great. We have about half an hour left. Do I use special equipment to drink it? Yeah, I have all kinds of paraphernalia. I have a pretty big collection of 19th century absinthe glasses and stuff. Although I typically use modern stuff. But yeah, it's typically use the standard accoutrements to drink the absinthe. Let's see here. Wow, so many questions. Where can you find the angelic script by Agrippa? It's in the 3 books of occult philosophy. It's in book 3. It's kind of a weird aside. He kind of says, "Oh yeah, and here's some angelic scripts or whatever." And so they're in book 3 of the 3 books of occult philosophy. You can find them there. Let's see here. No, pigskin binding is pretty typical. I mean, even from a kosher perspective, you can't eat pigs, and Jews wouldn't raise pigs, but it's not like unclean for me to touch it or anything like that. So I wouldn't be any sort of problem there about that. What's the best book about demons to understand possessions and things like that? I have like several books about demons, as you might imagine. the standard text is called Possession and Exorcism. It's a little dated now. And the name of the author is slipping my mind. It's a red book. Actually, it's printed with the same font that they use for The Exorcist, that they're leveraging a little bit of that. But I think the standard text in English is still this Possession and Exorcism book. I can maybe find a link for it, but that's the best book that covers it sort of from lots of different angles through time. So that's what the guy's name slips my mind now, but I can see it. It's on my shelf right there. There's a couple good books out about Dybbuk's and stuff like that as well, but that's the best academic study about possession and exorcism that I know of. All right, grab some other questions. Thoughts on Catholic exorcism? What do I think about Catholic exorcism? I think it's interesting. I think that it's one of those things that's a lot more common than you probably think. The exorcism ritual has been updated since in the past 30 years. They've had to update it because they're using it. I think most parishes have a parish exorcist. I think they have a person that's their gig. They do exorcisms. Also, I think another thing that people don't realize about exorcisms in the Catholic world, at least, is that we're so used to watching movies like The Exorcist, where the exorcism takes about 10 minutes and it's done, right? The power of Christ compels you, the power of Christ compels you, the blood of the martyrs compel you, and whiz bam, thank you, ma'am. You jump out the window and the exorcism is done. That's not how they go down. Typically, exorcisms take months of time for them to work, whatever that means. And I do think that they work in the sense that I think of possession as being a culturally bound sickness. And so being a culturally bound sickness, you can't cure it through any other mechanism than one that the person afflicted with it would understand to cure it. This is a well-attested phenomenon in anthropology. And so I think they work in that regard, and they take a lot longer than people think. Again, it's not like a whiz bam, thank you, ma'am. You got a possession case and you fix it in a day. Typically, they go on for months. I think that the exorcism case that the exorcist is based on in the 1950s was actually a boy, not a girl. But that exorcism took 4 months or something before it was successful, whatever that means. So yeah, I think that's what's interesting about exorcism. It takes a long time. Also, exorcism in the Jewish tradition almost always failed originally. People died all the time when people tried to exorcise people. Chaim Vital, the guy that founded, one of the big guys that founded Lurianic Kabbalah, or extended it, he was an exorcist, and he didn't work. He was bad at it, and people died because of the demon possessions and stuff. The demon would get out, and come back, and it would kill people. Dybbuk's. I think I've done a whole episode about Dybbuk's. 2 episodes, maybe, on the channel. It'd be great to have a conversation with Dr. Peter Forshaw. He teaches at University of Amsterdam. He was hired the year right before the year that I came there, right? The year that I was there, he was hired the year after that. And he's there at the University of Amsterdam. And I think he also works for the Rittman Library as well. Super smart guy. I really appreciate Dr. Forshaw's work. He's a really, really great scholar. Really appreciate him. Let's see here. I have not done an episode on Reginald Scott's The Discovery of Witchcraft, but I will. I've already done 1 episode on the demonologists. We got all the way up to the Malleus Maleficarum. The next episode, which I'm probably going to do sometime around Halloween, obviously, is going to be on the Malleus Maleficarum, all the way up probably to Martin Del Rio's Disquitorum Magicarum. And probably I'll cover all of that. And then there'll be and in there I'll cover The Discovery of Witchcraft, Reginald Scott's book. And then after that, I'll cover all of the skeptical reaction. People like Johannes Flyer, Spinoza, Hobbes, whatever. And so I'll cover that. So there are 2 more parts of those demonologists, those demonology series coming. I don't know when, probably in the fall sometime, because it feels more, I don't know, witchy something. I don't know. So I'll get to those sometime in the fall, probably. Volcatus. Marvel, the Physics of Transfigured Light. No, I've not heard of either one of those books. I'm not familiar with either one of those books at all. I don't know much about them. Yeah, to look them up. I'm sorry you donate money and I say I don't know. Yeah, I hate when that happens. My apologies. My apologies. Let's see. What is the weirdest spell that I've come across? Asks Error. I always think of Error as that. What is the character in Legend of Zelda 2? Where you walk up to him and he says, "I am Error." Error, what is the weirdest spells that I've come across? I think maybe one of the, I don't know if it's the weirdest, but there's a really great spell in the Greek magical papyri where you curse your boss and you throw a mummy at them. It's not clear what it means to throw a mummy at somebody, but in the spell it says for you to throw a mummy at them. And I just always like the idea of, like, you have a crap boss or whatever. Like, I don't know, I used to work at Barnes & Noble when I was like a teenager, and I had this like crappy boss. He was just like, it's like there's a particular kind of evil of managers of retail places that are mean, because they're the most powerless people in some ways, and they use that powerlessness as a way of like getting power by hurting their employees. I don't know. There's some, maybe if you worked in retail, you know what I'm talking about. But there's something about evil retail managers that's a phenomenon. Anyway, I had one of these that he was just not nice, and the idea of throwing a mummy at him just sounds hilarious. So maybe that's the weirdest example of one that I can think of, is the mummy throwing spell in the Greek magical papyri, which I like. I like the idea of throwing a mummy at someone. You shouldn't do that, by the way, because mummies were people, and you should be respectful of corpses. So you shouldn't throw mummies at people. But the idea of doing it is hilarious. All right, the idea of doing it is hilarious. I've heard stories, by the way. There were so many mummies back in the day, in the 19th century, they were using them for like fuel and trains and stuff, which is just terrible. But yeah, there used to be a lot more mummies than there are. People would like have mummy unwrapping parties in the Victorian times. They would like get a mummy and unwrap it as like a party favor. Speaking of Victorians, Adrian asked about the Victorian spiritualism movement. Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm going to do an episode about it for lots of reasons. But one reason what's really interesting is that the spiritualist movement, especially in America, was very radical, which is to say that it was very like socialistic and left-leaning and things like this. And people often forget that a lot of the spirit stuff was very progressive. And again, we often associate mysticism and magic with sort of, or the occult with kind of right-wing movements. But the Victorian spiritualist movement, especially the movement in North America, was very, very weirdly progressive, or left-leaning, or whatever you want to call it, socialistic. So it's a really interesting aspect of that world, where the politics coming out of it are surprising. Right? There's kind of a unified political agenda that emerges from the spiritualist movement. And so that's one of the aspects I'd like to cover, is how the spiritualist movement interacted with the temperance movement and politics and things like that. And it's a really fascinating question. It's a really fascinating topic. There's a book out called Radical Spirits that deals with this at length. It's a really cool look at the intersection of radical politics and spiritualism that existed in the 19th century. And of course, Houdini and stuff too is wrapped up in all that stuff as well, right? He's sort of a spiritualist debunker. So that stuff is interesting. He died in Detroit. If anyone here has some money and you want to make a cool bar, because that's what people with a lot of money do. I've heard that bars and restaurants are the hobbies of the rich. The funeral home that held Houdini's body when he was dead here in Detroit, he died in Detroit, just down the street on Cass. The funeral home that held his body is abandoned. You could buy it for like not much money probably, and like make it into like a Houdini bar. And it would be like literally where his body was held, right, before it left to go be buried. So if anyone has any money and wants to convert an old funeral home that held Houdini's body into a Houdini-themed bar, it'd be great. You should come do that. Come to Detroit and do that, and then give me some money. Give me some money. All right, look at some other questions. Oh, great. Let's see. Some folks from Israel. Wow. So many questions. Yeah, Ashera. Sure. Levy, thank you. Good jobs. Over in the Eretz. Yes, the best study for Asherah and just sort of divine Hebrew women is going to be Bataille's book, not Bataille, Patai, P-A-T-I, Raphael Bataille, and it's going to be his book on Did God Have a Wife? So his book is really, really good. Bataille's book is really good, and there's another book out there too that's slipping my mind now. But also deals with this question about the history of Yahweh and his consort, which we have that famous inscription from Kuntalit Jude that depicts both of them together. And also there's an inscription from Samaria that also mentions Yahweh and his consort. So yeah, those are the best. I think the Bataille book, The Divine Feminine, it's not called The Divine Feminine. The name of the book is slipping my mind, but if you it's one of his two big books, and if you Google it, it'll come up. So that's what I would do to take a look at that. Let's see here. So many great questions. Have I ever read up on the agoras and the agories? I've not read up on them. I know about them. I've seen documentaries, and I know a little bit about them, and famously like eating feces and living with dead people. So yeah, I know about them, but I'm not an expert or anything like that about them. Oh, Mihai. Yeah, it's great that Mihai's here. Folks who may not know Mihai, he has a really great, one of the best blogs out there on occult manuscripts. He digs into some of the most obscure occult manuscripts, grimoires that are out there, and his blog documents it. In fact, I became a patron of his this week because I'm so impressed with the quality and the quantity of the content that he's digging up in terms of old grimoires and stuff. So folks should definitely follow his blog. It's really, really good. Let's see. Thoughts on the memory palace concept of learning from the Masonic tradition. I mean, it's not just Masonic. It's sort of the European medieval way of thinking about memory in general. The memory palace system, whether you see it in Agrippa and Bruno, and you see it in lots of people. It's really common in the Middle Ages. I kind of do that. I kind of do that myself when I want to. If I'm trying to locate an idea in my mind, I often will imagine a room filled with all kinds of books, and the idea that I'm looking for will be in one of the books, and I'll kind of flip through it and use techniques or memory techniques to put things in a room. I'll build a sort of memory palace in my mind and populate it with thoughts, and use that as a way of sort of visually seeing what I'm working through. But yeah, the memory palace stuff is great. It's super interesting. Oh, thank you, Kazumi414. Yeah, thank you so much for the donation, and yeah, thank you for the donation. Thank you for the kind words on the Jewish mysticism stuff. That's really a lot of fun, and it's really a fun thing to do. More lecture-y kind of stuff, because I can be a little bit more freewheeling and irreverent, I guess. So it's a lot more fun. Yeah, Mihai, you should put the link to your blog in the chat, man. People really don't be falsely humble. You should put a link to the blog, because really, I think folks would really appreciate what you got going on, the research you do. Any plans for guests? Here and there. I think that I'll bring on people here and there, but not as a huge staple of the channel. I think that generally speaking, I want to keep it such that it's live streams and other stuff, but I'm not opposed to it later on. I might do it at some point in the future. One person I would like to bring on maybe next year is Walter Hanegraaff, my teacher from Amsterdam. I'd love to interview him. He's just seen so much over the years and developed the field as it stands now. I'd love to be able to hang out with him and ask him some questions. So hopefully that'll happen. I've emailed him and he's busy. Hopefully it'll happen at some point next year. Let's see. Abracadabra. You did it, Wayne. That's fantastic. That is fantastic. Do I take disciples or initiates? No, because I don't. To take an initiate, I would have to initiate them into something. I ain't got nothing. I'm just some guy with a beard and a hat and a vest. No, I don't have any You know, I don't have any sort of secret society or anything. I think the closest thing that I have would be, you know, I can initiate you into my YouTube channel. I can initiate you into my Patreon. And you're welcome to come ask me questions. You know, for folks on my Patreon, if you reach out and say, look, I want to, you know, get on a Zoom call, I'm happy to, you know, pencil you in and chat with you about basically anything. But I don't have the secrets to stuff, folks. I don't have the secrets to stuff. If I had the secrets to stuff, I'd be, wouldn't be doing YouTube. I'd be doing something else. Secret stuff. Secret stuff. Let's see. All right. Is Montague Summers fun reading? Oh, wow, you got one of his books from John King's local used bookstore. Montague Summers is a kind of a character. His books are fun to read. They're not reliable, but they're fun, right? They're like it's a kind of like pulp occultism that's really fun to read. His books on vampires and stuff are really great, but no, they're not reliable scholarship. I don't think they were reliable scholarship even then, but they're a lot of fun. And yeah, Montague Summers is a lot of fun to read. He's a lot of fun to read. Let's see, other folks. We've got 5 more minutes left. I'd like to know more about the origins of the tarot. Well, a great place to start, Miss Covington, about the tarot is go over to, again, I keep pointing the finger to Angela Puca's channel. Yeah, go over to Angela Puca's channel. She's done an episode on the history of tarot, and I think she's doing another one this weekend. So if you're interested in the history of tarot, she has videos for you. Like, go over there right now. Tell her I said hey. Support her work. She is awesome. So yeah, I would go check out her stuff. I would go check out that stuff. Telling you, man, this bar idea I have is a good idea, folks. I don't have a lot of good ideas, but I have some good ideas. Some vintage Uzo. I like Uzo. I like Rocky. I actually like Arak better than Uzo. That's my personal opinion. I really like Arak. If I were invited to an esoteric occult order, would I accept to join? No. No, probably not. Because I don't. The reason for it is real simple. I just don't. The metaphysics that I believe in, the philosophical metaphysics that I hold, which are again, I remind folks, I'm a dialectical materialist. That's the metaphysical beliefs I have. Is dialectical materialism. They're just not compatible with sort of esoteric worldviews typically, right? Which often involve the existence of the supernatural, and I'm not, just don't believe in that stuff. So I couldn't join at some level because I don't think I could do it in good faith. I've been invited to join a couple of different organizations, and I'm deeply, deeply honored when they asked me to join, when they invite me to join. I find it just to be a tremendous honor, but I have to politely refuse because it's just not my bag. Not my bag. I think I want to join a secret society, be a secret society like I don't know, like the secret societies in like Foucault's pendulum. Like it would have to be really ironic somehow. The hipster occultism. That's what I will get down with. Which would really just be us sitting around drinking absinthe and listening to Neutral Milk Hotel all the time. People would think we're doing all kinds of cool stuff, but we're just doing that. Yeah, new film review. Yes, I was actually going to do one this week, and then I just skipped out on it. I think the next cult film review book or episode I'm going to do is going to be on The Vigil, which is one of the rare Jewish horror movies. There are ever rarely Jewish horror movies, and this one is incredible, folks. If you're a horror fan, it's called The Vigil. It's excellent. It's really, really good. And it'll allow me to talk about the Mazakim, or the Mazakine, if you want to do Mishnaic Hebrew, Aramaic. The Mazakine and the sort of demons of the Talmud and things like that. So I think the next one I'll do, maybe next week or week after, I don't know, will be on The Vigil and looking at the Talmudic concept of the Mazakim, the damagers is what they literally mean, the damagers. All right, let's get a few last questions before I sign off for the afternoon. Were there many connections between early Christian Gnosticism and later Christian esoterics, such as the Hermetics or Agrippa? Not historical connections, probably not. I don't typically fall into the camp that says that Hermeticism or Gnosticism survived from antiquity. Now, it did in some places. The Mandeans, the Nabatean agriculture, the Sabaeans probably were some quasi-Gnostic sect, but I don't think it really survived past the late classical period. So I don't think that there are direct connections. And so, yeah, not so much that. Not so much that. Do I know of any occult researchers well versed in contemporary logic and mathematics, topology, geometry, physics? I don't know of any. I mean, if you get good in like modern logic, modern mathematics, and modern mathematical topology, which is incredibly complex, you probably don't have much time to be doing other stuff. Do I think that Jesus really existed? Yes. Yeah, I think that Jesus definitely really existed. I'm fairly confident. Whatever that means. I'm as confident he existed as I am any ancient person existed, basically. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he existed. Pretty sure he existed. All right. Let me get just one last question, folks. I'm going to have to call it a day. Have I studied Lurianic Kabbalah? Yep, a whole bunch. Probably won't make episodes about Islamic mysticism because there's already a great guy out there, Philip Holm, doing that work over at Let's Talk Religion. He's doing excellent work, and I absolutely would yeah, his work is amazing, and he's doing great work on that stuff. Who would win in a fight, John Dee and Edward Kelly versus Joseph Smith and Oliver? Oh, Edward Kelly. He would kill him. Edward Kelly literally tried to kill people. Like he like stabbed a dude with a sword or something one time. His name was Alexander. He was a servant of some other dude. They got into a duel and he almost killed him. Yeah, Edward Kelly would get super drunk and fight people. So yeah, absolutely, Edward Kelly for the win. All right, on that, folks. On that note, Edward Kelly for the win. I think I'm gonna wrap it up, folks, and wrap it up. I mean, just again, like I try to say every time, I think that one of the things that I found about living, one of the ways I found to live a really great life is to cultivate gratitude, right? To cultivate a feeling of gratitude about the things we have in our life, because at least in my life, I have a lot of things going well for me. And what I want to say is I'm really grateful for you all, right? I'm really grateful. And I really mean that in a really heartfelt way. You guys make this channel possible. You make this whole project possible. You make it fun. You make it engaging. You challenge me with all these like awesome questions, and makes me like go like, I gotta go read some I gotta go read some Franz Bardon. I gotta go, man, I don't know Manly P. Hall. Like I gotta go read the stuff. You guys really inspire me to work hard to produce, I hope, really great content for you all. And yeah, I just want to say, I want to express my gratitude for the folks that watch the channel, that subscribe, especially for the folks who support the channel financially through Patreon and through also donations. People send in donations. That stuff means a lot to me. It really, really. Every time I log into Patreon and I see that folks are spending their hard-earned money to support this work and to support me making this content available to the population, right? Basically, I'm trying to provide education for free, which is the way education should be, in my opinion. So I really appreciate all of y'all. For people who subscribe, share the content, tweet out the content, people who interact with me, people who support me financially. And if you're interested in supporting Esoterica financially, jump over to Patreon, sign up. That makes this all possible. So again, I just want to say before I wrap up, thank you all so much for your support of the channel, for taking me seriously at all, and also taking me not seriously, because I should be taken just about as seriously as not sometimes. So thank you all. I hope that hope you guys have a great weekend. If you observe the Sabbath, I hope that you have a wonderful and very peaceful Sabbath. And if you don't, I hope you have a wonderful and peaceful time regardless. Take care of yourself. Take care of those around you. Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you so much. All right, until a couple of weeks, folks. I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks for for another live stream. Thank you again for hanging out with me. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, Hope everyone has peace and relaxation. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people you love. See you guys.